Mornings in Nashville have always been particularly calm, especially in the suburban areas where life flowed calmly and without the bustle of the big city. Ethan Miller woke up to the soft glow of sunlight filtering through the translucent curtains. There was a slight coolness in his bedroom. The air conditioner ran all night, protecting Ethan and his wife Lindsay from the sultry July heat. Ethan, a 32-year-old engineer at a construction company, loved these morning moments. He woke up early at 6 in the morning, as usual, in order to have time to calmly drink coffee and get ready for work without rushing. As he sat up in bed, the first thing he noticed was the subtle scent of Lindsay's perfume. Her bottle of bergamot and jasmine stood on the dressing table, exuding a delicate but noticeable trail, reminiscent of her inherent elegance. He turned his head and saw Lindsay, who was 30 years old. She was lying on her side, her long brown hair spilling over the pillow. Her face reflected the calmness and quiet joy of sleep. Over the 5 years of marriage, Ethan got used to her habits, loving to soak in bed for at least 10 more minutes after waking up, always reading some book on marketing or novels before bed that helped her relax after a working day. She worked in the field of marketing and knew how to convince people not only in the professional field, but also in her personal life. Her natural charm and confidence often inspired Ethan himself to take bolder steps. He smiled looking at her. Always found her cute, even when she was a little grouchy in the morning. He carefully stood up, trying not to disturb his wife's sleep, and proceeded to the bathroom, where he washed his face with cool water, shaking off the remnants of drowsiness. Turning on the lamp above the mirror, he noticed in his reflection light shadows under his eyes, the consequences of the late completion of the project the day before. But the mood did not dampen. There was a new day ahead, new professional challenges, and in the evening he and Lindsay planned to discuss the long-awaited family vacation. "Hey, are you awake yet?" A quiet, slightly sleepy voice was heard from the bedroom. Ethan opened the door slightly, smiling. Lindsay propped herself up on the pillows and stretched. "Yes, honey, as you can see. I wanted to give you a little more time to sleep," he answered, approaching the bed. He sat down next to her and put his hand on her shoulder. Lindsay smiled back at him, closing her eyes. "You know, today is an important day," she said, trying to finally wake up. "We were going to discuss vacation options. I already want a change of scenery. I think we both need this." Ethan gently stroked her cheek. "Exactly. I keep thinking about where we could go. Maybe let's return to the idea about the mountains in Colorado, or do you prefer the coastal option?" For a moment, Lindsay's eyes flashed with excitement. She sat up a little straighter, her hair still scattered over her shoulders, and answered, "To be honest, in recent weeks, I've only been dreaming about the sea, the beach, the sound of the waves, but the mountains are also good. The main thing is that we go somewhere away from the bustle of the office." She ran her hand over his shoulder and spent time together. "We both need it." Ethan nodded. "Okay, let's finally decide this evening. Today after work, we can have dinner together somewhere in the city. How are you?" Lindsay looked pleased. "With pleasure." In the meantime, she leaned over and kissed him tenderly on the cheek. "Run and drink your coffee, and I'll bury myself in the pillow for a few more minutes. I need to be in the office early today. We are launching a new project." Ethan nodded with a smile and left the bedroom. He headed to the kitchen, where the coffee machine, one of his favorite purchases, was already sitting on the countertop. He had a little ritual. Every morning he would make a cappuccino, then sit at the kitchen table and just watch the sunrise through the large window for 5 to 10 minutes. At such moments, he felt at peace and was glad that his life was so stable. When the cappuccino was ready, he stood by the window and peered out into the street. The neighbors' neat lawns, clean asphalt, rare cars passing by. There was no sign of a storm. It was the end of July on the calendar. The sun was rising above the horizon, promising a hot day, and there was a feeling in the air that everything was going as it should. Ethan always valued his home, small but comfortable, purchased with a mortgage that he and Lindsay diligently paid off. This house symbolized their future together. A few minutes later, Lindsay came into the kitchen wearing a short robe. She rubbed her eyes slightly and suggested, "Listen, let me quickly cook some scrambled eggs. Or were you already planning to leave?" Ethan looked at his watch. It was only just after 6. "Why not? With pleasure. I have to drive about 20 minutes to the office, so I have time." Lindsay began cooking, deftly cracking eggs into the pan. The smell of oil and the hissing of the fire wafted through the kitchen. In between times, she talked about her plans. "Today, we are going to launch a new promotion campaign. Our new client is a restaurant chain. They want to expand their presence in the city. I have meetings with designers, copywriters. In general, I'll have to run around." Ethan listened with genuine interest. He, being an engineer, did not always understand the intricacies of marketing work, but he knew how important it was for it. "It sounds stressful, but I'm sure you can handle it. You always succeed." Lindsay stopped for a moment and looked at him with a warm smile. "Thank you. Your support always gives me confidence. How's it going at work? Still busy with the bridge project?" Ethan nodded. "Yes, fortunately, now is the finish line. All that remains are the final calculations, approvals from the city authorities, and a couple of minor corrections. If everything goes according to plan, we will officially complete the project in a couple of months." They continued talking while they ate breakfast, exchanging jokes and short stories. Nothing indicated that on this particular day simple, familiar things could turn into something tragic in their lives. They had joint plans, common aspirations, and everyone contributed to their cozy world. Before they parted at the door, Lindsay straightened the collar of Ethan's shirt and said tenderly, "Call me when you are free. Maybe I can sneak out for lunch." Ethan closed his eyes from the pleasure of her touch. "I'll definitely call, and in the evening dinner and discussion of vacation." She smiled back, and Ethan gave her a short kiss and left the house. He got into his car, turned on the radio, and went to work, anticipating a positive, productive day. Ethan's commute to work usually took about 20 minutes if there were no traffic jams. He drove through quiet streets, gradually moving to busier areas where office buildings were located. His company, Miller Construction, was located in a modern office complex on the outskirts of downtown. When he pulled into the parking lot, the clock hand was approaching 8:30. Ethan liked to arrive early so he could calmly prepare for the workday and drink another cup of coffee in the office. In the reception area sat Mary, a smiling woman of about 40 who always tried to make her colleagues' mornings a little better. Seeing Ethan, she waved her hand to him. "Good morning, Mr. Miller. How are you doing?" Ethan responded with a smile. "Wonderful, Mary. How are you doing?" She exhaled joyfully. "Yes, everything is fine. But the coffee machine has run out, so we're waiting for the supplier. But as always, there is a fresh package in the pantry for you." Ethan winked, showing that he appreciated her concern, and moved towards the elevator. Having risen to his floor, he walked along the corridor past the offices of his colleagues and noticed that most had not yet arrived. Pushing open the glass door of his department, he headed straight to the small kitchen area to make coffee. Thoughts about the upcoming vacation were still spinning in his head. He thought about which option was preferable. Perhaps she and Lindsay would choose a small resort by the ocean where they could forget about schedules and deadlines. Rent a car and drive along the coast, stopping in small towns. A pleasant, calm picture that slightly pushed aside all work worries. But work concerns could not be ignored. At 9 in the morning, his colleagues were waiting for him to discuss the latest calculations for the bridge. This was a serious project, the budget of which exceeded hundreds of millions of dollars, and how reliable and safe the construction would be depended on the professionalism of the team. Ethan had been working for this company for several years and was valued as a responsible and thorough engineer. As he filled the coffee pot with water in the kitchen, his colleague and friend, Marcus, a man of about 35 with short-cropped reddish hair and light freckles on his nose, approached him. He tapped Ethan on the shoulder. "Good morning, buddy. Are you ready for our meeting?" Ethan looked at his friend and smiled. "Good morning. Ready as possible this early. All our calculations are in order. I double-checked the drawings until late yesterday. I hope the security department won't find any reason to find fault with us today. Marcus laughed quietly. Well, you know this bureaucracy of ours. There will always be small flaws that people want to highlight, but we try to be perfect. How are you? Ethan poured coffee into 2 mugs and handed one to Marcus. Great. On the weekend, my wife and children went to the lake. Well, you remember, the same place where our parents' house is. The children were delighted. They rowed a boat and fished. I even got a little tan. Marcus lifted the sleeve of his shirt, showing a tan line. It's a pity you couldn't join us. But I understand projects, deadlines. Ethan became slightly depressed. Yes, I planned to break out, but it didn't work out. Maybe we'll come back sometime later. I'll remind you again. They walked into a small conference room. Gradually, the rest of the staff began to arrive. Designers, engineers, a couple of people from the security department. Ethan felt the work atmosphere absorbing him, his mind calming down, immersing himself in the familiar environment of formulas, drawings, and technical terms. At 9 o'clock, the meeting began. On the screen connected to the laptop, drawings of the future bridge appeared, a complex structure designed to connect the 2 banks of the river and relieve congestion on the old highways. Ethan and Marcus described the calculations in detail and answered questions. Everything went smoothly, without surprises. When, at the end of the meeting, the security representatives simply nodded, thanked him for his thorough work, and said that nothing really needed to be corrected, Ethan breathed a sigh of relief. Great job, guys, summed up the project manager. I think we can set aside a couple of hours after lunch today to finalize the details with the architects. Ethan, you'll lead this discussion, okay? He nodded, hiding a slight pride behind a calm smile. Of course, no problem. I'll be in touch. After the meeting, Ethan returned to his desk and looked at his phone, hoping to see a message from Lindsay. But there was only a notification from the bank and some kind of advertising offer. She's probably already had a hectic day, he thought, not giving it any importance. Lindsay usually texted or called during the day if they couldn't have lunch together. But today, apparently, she was too busy, and Ethan decided not to bother her unnecessarily. He delved into his work tasks, glancing at his watch, wondering, shouldn't he go to a small restaurant nearby, at least for a quick lunch? After sharing his plans with Marcus, Ethan realized that his colleague wanted to have lunch in the office so as not to waste time. Then Ethan went alone. Coming out of the building, he felt the hot air envelop him as soon as he crossed the threshold. Typical July weather in Tennessee is humid, sizzling warm. He walked into a nearby restaurant known for its turkey sandwiches and took a table by the window. While he was waiting for the order, he habitually looked at the news feed on his phone. My thoughts returned to my vacation. He remembered how, before they were married, he and Lindsay went on a car tour through the southern states, staying at roadside motels. There were so many funny stories and different adventures. He hoped that their future vacation would be just as fun and romantic. Over lunch, he called the travel agency to clarify the details of possible trips, but did not dare to book anything yet. I wanted to wait to see what Lindsay had to say. After lunch, he returned to his desk, where he spent the rest of the day in endless calculations, documents, and short movements between offices. Around 5 in the evening, he glanced at his phone. There was no call or text from Lindsay. It was slightly unusual, but he chalked it up to being busy. We'll discuss everything in the evening, he decided, getting ready to go home. However, at 6 o'clock the bell rang. Lindsay's number flashed on the screen. Ethan responded happily. Hello, dear. How is your day? He heard the fatigue in her voice. Hello. Sorry, I didn't write. Today we have one emergency after another. Looks like I'll have to stay in the office longer. We still have an emergency meeting with a client, and I won't be able to arrive on time. Ethan felt slightly disappointed, but did not show it. I understand, it's okay. This is not the first time we have postponed plans. Let's do it tomorrow then, or if you don't come back too late, we can just sit at home, drink wine, and talk. Lindsay sighed on the other end of the line. I'm afraid it will be very late today. Don't wait for me, go to bed. We'll catch up with everything tomorrow, I promise. And although she sounded a little worried, Ethan decided that she was just tired. Doesn't happen to anyone. Okay, take care of yourself. He said, don't overload yourself. If something is urgent, call. They said goodbye. Ethan packed his things and left the office, planning in advance how he would spend his free evening. He wanted to stop at the supermarket, buy something for dinner, and start reading a book he had recently purchased. It was a mystery about missing treasure, which he became interested in after being recommended by a friend. Things didn't go as Ethan planned. Around 7 in the evening, when he was about to pay for a purchase at the supermarket, a colleague called him. Listen, our meeting with the architects tomorrow was canceled, or rather, postponed until next week. You don't have to get up early. You can come later tomorrow if you want. Ethan chuckled. Great news. I'll be home early today and try to get some rest. He ended the call, paid for the groceries, and left. In the parking lot, he suddenly thought, what if now, since I have free time, I stop at a pizzeria and get something tasty? Maybe I'll have a little celebration for myself. But then I decided that there was enough food in the refrigerator at home, and I needed to use it up. After all, it wasn't wise to spend the extra money. When he returned to the car, he looked up at the sky. The sun was already hiding behind the horizon, and the orange streaks of sunset painted the clouds. The hot air began to cool, carrying a light evening breeze. Usually at such moments, Ethan thought about Lindsay. They loved watching sunsets together on the terrace. However, today she was busy. Well, she's trying hard for a new campaign, he thought. I will support her, no matter how hard it is. This is temporary. He got home without traffic jams. It took about 10 minutes. Having left the main road, he found himself on a quiet street where there were neat houses with manicured lawns. Their house is already visible a cute facade, trimmed bushes by the window. But his gaze suddenly caught on something unusual. There was an unfamiliar dark blue pickup parked in the driveway. Ethan's heart seemed to take a leap. He wasn't expecting any guests today, and Lindsay was clearly at work. Maybe it was friends or neighbors stopping by. But the pickup truck was definitely not one he had ever seen in the area. It's like someone from afar. Ethan parked the car near the sidewalk, trying to remain calm. Maybe everything is completely innocent, and there's just a plumber or other craftsman inside. Suddenly something broke at home. But Lindsay didn't tell him anything. He got out of the car, locked the door, and began to slowly approach the house. I looked around the pickup. The rear window was covered with a sticker from some sports team. It seemed like a baseball team. There was a baseball cap on the passenger seat. No other identifying marks. The front door of their house was closed, but not locked. The handle gave out as soon as he pulled it. It was strange because Lindsay usually locked the door, especially when she was alone. Anxiety began to creep into Ethan's heart. He entered the living room, where only the floor lamp in the corner was burning. Lindsay usually liked to turn on the overhead light. There was deathly silence inside. Lindsay, are you home? He called quietly, although his voice trembled treacherously. Not a sound. He walked through the living room and noticed her laptop lying on the couch, but didn't touch it. I went into the kitchen. Everything was in place, except that there was a glass of water and some kind of postcard on the table. But now he was interested in something else. Who owns the pickup truck? And where is this man? Then he heard muffled sounds from above, from somewhere on their second floor. Voices, quiet laughter, or maybe whispers. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. He no longer hoped that it was something harmless. Is it possible? No, he refused to believe that it was starting to creep into him. Maybe Lindsay is at home after all, and this is her friend from work. But she said that she would be late. His thoughts were confused. He carefully began to climb the stairs, trying not to creak. Every step felt like torture. My heart was pounding loudly in my chest. On the second floor, there was their bedroom and another room used as a guest room. The door to their bedroom was closed. A lamp was burning in the corridor. As he got closer, he heard sounds that left little chance for innocence. Someone's voices, muffled kisses, the rustling of sheets. Everything in Ethan's chest broke. From shock, he froze in place, gasping for air. A thought appeared in my head. Maybe I'm going crazy. I guess I just heard it. But every new sound destroyed his hope. It was reality, hard and cold. He pushed the door open, with little control over his own actions. A scene appeared before his eyes that he was unlikely to ever be able to forget. Lindsay was lying on their marital bed, and next to her was a man, dark-skinned, with short hair, a little over 30. They both froze the moment the door swung open. The silence seemed to last forever, but in reality it was a matter of seconds. Lindsay, her hair disheveled, propped herself up on her elbow. Her eyes widened in horror, her lips trembled. The man, whom Ethan saw for the first time in his life, immediately jumped up, trying to throw on some clothes. Uh, Ethan. Lindsay croaked, unable to find words. It's not what you think. She tried to get up, covering herself with the blanket. But Ethan stood there, as if numb, and could not look away. His consciousness refused to perceive what was happening. As soon as he imagined that just an hour ago he was thinking about a quiet evening and a future vacation, now everything collapsed in an instant. Crap, the stranger muttered, looking for his shirt. Lindsay reached out to Ethan, her face contorted with fear and guilt. Wait, listen to me. We. She began to get confused in her words. I don't know how this happened. Ethan suddenly felt a wave of rage and despair rise in his chest. He knew that in just a moment he would not be able to hold back. But, contrary to expectations, he did not scream. His hands clenched into fists and his lips pressed into a thin line. It seemed that all the feelings were fighting inside him at once. Anger, hatred, pain, the desire to explain everything, and most importantly, absolute disbelief that this was actually happening to him. For a brief moment, his gaze met the gaze of the stranger, whose face expressed a mixture of fear and shame. Lindsay tried to approach Ethan, extending her hand towards him, but he retreated. Without saying a word, he turned around and walked away. It seemed to him that the walls of the house were falling on him. Every object in the corridor reminded him of past happiness, which overnight turned into a farce. "Ethan, wait!" she shouted after him, but he didn't even turn around. He got behind the wheel and, without looking at the house, started the engine. Everything was bubbling inside, tears blurred his vision, but he held them back, as if refusing to give in to weakness. Thus ended their idyll, in an instant, in the silence of a treacherous evening. When Ethan drove away from home, he didn't know where to go. His entire familiar world was turned upside down. Thoughts rushed about like naughty insects in a jar. She cheated. How long ago? For what? What did I do wrong? But through these questions, one mad impulse dominated to run away from the place that had now become hateful to him. After driving a couple of kilometers, he abruptly stopped at a roadside bar. It was a small establishment with a neon sign that often attracted passers-by on warm summer evenings. Ethan wasn't usually a fan of getting drunk, especially in unfamiliar places. But now he was ready to do anything to forget this monstrous picture. He parked the car in a poorly lit parking lot and turned off the engine. Before leaving, he closed his eyes and just sat there for a couple of seconds, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He let out heavy sighs through clenched teeth, trying to regain some modicum of self-control. "Oh God," he burst out with deep sorrow. "Why is this happening to me?" Here, in the car, in the dark, he was alone with his feelings. A few minutes later, he left and headed towards the entrance of the bar. Music, laughter, and the noise of voices filled his ears as he opened the door. The room wasn't too big. A wooden counter, a few tables, a couple of pool tables at the far end. A couple of men were sitting at the counter, one of whom burst out laughing, apparently having heard the other's joke. The smell of alcohol, tobacco, and cheap perfume was everywhere. Ethan walked over to the counter and sat down on one of the high chairs. The bartender, a plump man of about 50 with tattoos on his arms, gave him an appraising look. "What should we drink, buddy?" he asked. Ethan replied automatically. "Whiskey with ice. The strongest." The bartender nodded without asking any further questions, took out a bottle and filled the glass. When Ethan took his first sip, a burning bitterness spread through his throat and chest, but he knew that this was exactly what he needed right now. The taste of whiskey sent a shiver through my body, both disgusting and soothing. He sat there, silently, staring at one point in front of him. Memories of Lindsay swarmed in my head, their first meeting at a party with mutual friends. How she was in a green dress, laughing, and he could not take his eyes off her. How they went on their first date to a small Italian restaurant. How he invited her to live together and then proposed. All this is a series of happy moments which now seemed like a phantom, a feigned fairy tale broken into harsh reality. 10 or 15 minutes passed, during which he drank almost a full glass. The bartender, noticing this, suggested adding more. More? He asked with a hint of sympathy. Ethan nodded, feeling like he wasn't getting enough. He wanted to drown out the inner pain. Then let's have one more double, Ethan muttered. As soon as the bartender poured a new drink, Ethan took another sip, this time a little more carefully. He knew that if he drank too quickly, he could completely lose control. A couple of minutes later, a stranger sat down next to him, clearly a little tipsy. He greeted Ethan with a nod and ordered a beer. Seeing the strange gloom in Ethan's eyes, he asked, "Problems, buddy?" Ethan glanced at him. Short-haired blonde, maybe in his 30s, slightly crumpled looking. "There is a little," Ethan answered briefly, not wanting to go into details. "Understand. In such a bar, everyone is usually either celebrating something or trying to forget. Judging by your facial expression, it's the latter." Ethan did not answer, but silently took a sip of whiskey. The stranger, apparently, realized that the conversation was not going well and turned his back to him and started drinking his beer. Time dragged on painfully. People were walking by, some were jostling, playing billiards. Ethan felt intoxication gradually cover him, bringing with it a slight feeling of the unreality of what was happening. The whiskey dulled the pain a little, but instead a feverish anger arose. He took out his phone and mechanically began scrolling through his contacts. His gaze settled on the name Cody. Cody is his longtime friend and has been through many adventures with him since his college years. Ethan immediately knew that he was the one to call now. As soon as he pressed the call button, Cody answered, as if he sensed that Ethan needed help. But as soon as Ethan's hoarse voice was heard, the smile disappeared. "Damn, Ethan, what happened? Are you okay?" Ethan said dully. "No, Lindsay. She was with another man. At our house." There was stunned silence at the other end of the line. "God, bro." That's all Cody could squeeze out after a long pause. "Where are you now?" "At the Roadhouse bar. I just sit and drink whiskey. I don't want to go home." Cody sighed heavily, realizing the seriousness of what was happening. "Listen, don't get drunk there until you pass out. It won't help. Give me half an hour. I'll try to come." Ethan nodded weakly, although his friend didn't see it. "Fine. I'm here. I'll be waiting." He turned off the call. The remaining time he sat, sipped whiskey, and looked at one point, almost not noticing what was happening around him. Lindsay's face appeared before my eyes again and again, frightened, guilty. How could she? Didn't she love him? Or maybe everything has cooled down a long time ago. About half an hour later, the bar door opened again, and Ethan caught a familiar silhouette out of the corner of his eye. It was Cody, slightly above average height, stocky, with a short beard, wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans. He made his way between the tables, looking for Ethan. Seeing him, Cody came up and put his arm around his friend's shoulders. "I'm here, buddy. Come on." He appreciated the empty glass and Ethan's empty look. "Looks like you've already made a good attempt at forgetting yourself." Ethan sighed. "Sorry for dragging you into this." Cody sat down next to him and motioned for the bartender. "Let's bring him some water and something simpler for me too." Then he turned to Ethan. "I don't know what's going on in your head, but let me help you figure it out." They sat like that for about an hour. Ethan broke into crazy monologues, how he hated the moment when he decided to leave home without talking, without demanding an explanation. Cody listened carefully, occasionally inserting calm words, trying to bring Ethan to his senses. During this hour, Ethan managed to finally dispel the fog of shock and anger in his head, although the pain did not go away. Cody, I don't know what to do now. We shared a house, we planned a vacation, and now it's all over. Cody looked him in the eye. Listen, bro, you need to calm down first. I understand how painful it is, but you need to make a cold decision. It has happened that people make peace after such things, but this is betrayal, and everything is very difficult here. Ethan chuckled bitterly. Make peace? After this? I'm not sure I can even look her in the eyes. Cody nodded. I understand. Then you need to do what's best for you. Maybe live separately. Think. In the meantime, let me take you to my place. I have a guest room. I won't leave you alone in this state. Ethan at first wanted to refuse, but he understood that he was unlikely to be able to drive a car now, and the prospect of returning to a house where everything reminded him of betrayal was unbearable. Thank you, Cody. You are a true friend, he said with a wry smile. Really, I don't want to burden you. Come on, what are you talking about? Let's go. Cody paid for the drinks, took the keys to Ethan's car, and made arrangements with the bartender to keep an eye on it until the morning or call a tow truck. However, the bartender turned out to be friendly. You can leave it in our parking lot. We'll lock it at night and pick it up in the morning when you come to your senses. Cody thanked him, and they headed to Cody's car parked nearby. All of Ethan's feelings were mixed up. He could barely stand on his feet. A cocktail of rage, pain, and whiskey was bubbling in my stomach. He looked at the lights of the night city, trying to comprehend what had happened. They barely spoke the entire way to Cody's house. Ethan stared out the window, repeating the same thoughts in his head. What now? How to live further? Arriving at Cody's house, they went inside. Melanie, Cody's wife, met them with a worried look. Oh God, what happened? She asked, noticing Ethan's depressed state. Cody motioned for his wife not to ask questions. It's okay, honey. It's just that Ethan has a difficult situation. He will stay with us for the night. Certainly, Melanie said softly, although her eyes continued to express concern. If you need something, speak up. Ethan thanked him, apologized for disturbing him, and went to the guest room that Cody showed him. His head was pounding from drinking, and his soul was bursting with grief. He stripped down to his underwear, collapsed on the bed, and lay awake for a long time, staring into the darkness. Sometimes he thought he heard Lindsay's voice, saw her smile. But then I remembered the terrible scene of betrayal. That night, Ethan was finally convinced. His past life was no more, and he would never be the same. The next morning, Ethan woke up with a headache and weakness. It took him a few seconds to realize where he was and why. But the memories from the previous evening came flooding back like a cold shower. He sat down on the bed and covered his face with his hands. A few minutes later, he heard a knock on the door. Ethan, buddy, are you awake? Cody's voice sounded quiet, as if he was trying not to disturb in vain. Yes, come in. Cody opened the door slightly. In his hands, he held a glass of water and headache pills. Here, take it. It will help you come to your senses. And Melanie made breakfast if you want. Ethan nodded gratefully. Thank you, brother. Without you, I would probably just be lost. Stop it, we're friends. We go to the kitchen. There is coffee and toast. Ethan took the pills, drank some water, and got dressed and followed Cody. In the kitchen, he saw Melanie, who smiled at him sympathetically. Hello, Ethan. I made some scrambled eggs and toast. I hope you find it easier. Ethan didn't have the slightest appetite, but he didn't want to offend. He thanked him and sat down at the table, taking a light bite of his toast. Cody also joined breakfast, staring out the window as if contemplating how best to start the conversation. Finally, Ethan himself broke the silence. I can't go back to this house, Cody. I don't want to see her there anymore, even if she suddenly comes to ask for forgiveness. He swallowed the lump in his throat. The moment I saw them in our bed, it was like a knife to the heart. I can't get over this. Cody nodded after a pause. Understand, but you will have to stop by, at least to get things and documents. You won't live with us forever." Melanie added softly, "Yes, but you can stay as long as you need. We don't mind. And then you'll decide what to do next. Maybe it's still worth talking to her. Find out what happened." Ethan sighed. The thought of talking to Lindsay only made the pain worse. But he understood that sooner or later this would have to be done, if only for the sake of formalities. "Okay, I'll think about it. But first I'll go there alone. I want to remove her things so that—" The voice trembled with pain and rage, "so that she doesn't just come back as if nothing happened." Cody, understanding his friend's condition, asked carefully, "Do you want me to go with you and help you?" Ethan shook his head. "No, it's too personal. I have to do this alone." Immediately after breakfast, he thanked Cody and Melanie for their hospitality. They exchanged a short hug. Cody gave him the keys to his car, which they had left at the bar the day before. "Come on, I'll take you to your car." As they drove, Ethan said almost nothing, only occasionally asking about turns. When they got there, Ethan's car was in the bar's parking lot. The bar was closed. It was still early. "If anything, call Cody," said goodbye. "And remember, you are not alone." Ethan nodded, got behind the wheel, and drove towards the house. The road seemed longer than usual, as if the city itself did not want him to return to the place of betrayal. In the end, he turned onto the right street, and now their house appeared. There was no stranger's pickup truck in the driveway, and Lindsay's car wasn't there either. Perhaps she left early in the morning or at night. Ethan's heart sank painfully at the thought that it was all true, that they were no longer the family they had been all these years. He turned off the engine, took a deep breath, and got out of the car. The air seemed heavier to him than usual, as if a cloud of pain hung over this house. Approaching the door, Ethan discovered that it was locked. He took out the keys, opened it, and went inside. The living room greeted him with silence and weak daylight breaking through the curtains. This was his favorite corner, a soft sofa, a small coffee table where they often drank evening tea together. Now everything here seemed empty and cold. He slowly walked up to the second floor. The bedroom was left in chaos. Rumpled sheets, a discarded pillow, the smell of someone else's perfume mixed with Lindsay's scent. All this was unbearably painful. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, trying to hold back the tears. Then he began to act automatically. Knowing where Lindsay's things were, he began throwing them into a suitcase he found in the closet. He didn't think about neatness. He simply took dresses, shirts, trousers, underwear, everything that caught his eye. He put her cosmetics, everything that physically connected him with her, in a separate bag. While he did this, tears flowed down his cheeks, but he did not stop. When the suitcase was almost full, he heard the front door open behind him. My heart froze. Has she really returned? He thought, realizing that a collision was about to occur. "Ethan," he heard Lindsay's voice from below. He did not answer, but after a few seconds her silhouette appeared in the doorway. She was wearing a dark skirt, a shirt, and low-heeled shoes. Apparently, she had run out of the office. Her face was pale, her eyes were red, as if she had been crying. Seeing Ethan throwing her things into the suitcase, Lindsay gasped. "What are you doing?" Ethan straightened up, looking at her with strange calm. "I'm collecting everything that belongs to you. You don't belong here anymore." Lindsay stepped forward, tears instantly forming in her eyes. "No, Ethan, please, let me explain everything. It was a terrible mistake. I don't know what came over me." He cut off her words with a short wave of his hand. "Enough. I don't want to hear your excuses. You ruined everything." She dropped her shoulders, trying to speak. "I admit I made a terrible mistake. I met Ryan a couple of months ago. He's a new employee with us. One day we started working together often, and everything started to take off. But I don't know how to explain it. It was just sex." Listening to her confused explanations, Ethan felt hatred boiling inside. But along with her, pain, confusion, and some kind of dull pity for himself, and maybe for her, sounded in his soul. "You didn't want to, but you did," he answered coldly. "And more than once, I believe." Lindsay sobbed. "I'm sorry. Ethan felt his heart tighten to a painful point. This meant that all this time she was lying to him, smiling in the morning, going to bed with him, and then to another. "Leave," he said, having difficulty controlling his voice. "Here are your things. If you need anything else, I will send it. Please just leave." Lindsay tried to come closer, sobbing. "Let me stay, at least for a minute. We need to talk, Ethan, please." But he didn't even look at her. I said, "Go away." Lindsay, seeing his determination, took the suitcase and the package he had prepared. Despair was visible on her face. "Where should I go? I have no other place to live." Ethan replied with cold contempt. "You can go to Ryan. I don't care." He walked to the window, turning away from her so as not to see how she left the room looking defeated. Several minutes passed before he heard the front door slam. Lindsay left. He exhaled, feeling his hands shake. In the living room, near the front door, he saw her keys. She left them, realizing that she was no longer welcome here, as if confirmation that a period had been drawn between them. A few minutes later, he called a locksmith he knew. "Hello, Frank. Sorry to bother you so suddenly, but I urgently need to change the locks in my house." "Yes, right today." He agreed. Ethan understood that he was doing everything emotionally, but at the same time he felt that he could not live otherwise. He didn't want her in his house, didn't even want the chance that she could enter unnoticed. While waiting for the locksmith, he went into the kitchen, poured himself some water, and, looking around, as if he had seen this house for the first time. Every detail reminded her. Photographs on the wall, a shared calendar, cute notes on the refrigerator that they wrote to each other in the morning. Now it all seemed like a vulgar decoration. An hour later, Frank arrived, an elderly man in overalls who had known Ethan and his father for a long time. He noticed Ethan's gloomy state and shook his head knowingly, but didn't ask any questions. He worked quickly and silently, changing all the locks on the door and the gate to the yard. When he finished, he handed over the new keys. "Here you go, guy. I hope everything will be fine." Ethan tried to smile, paid him, and thanked him. When Frank left, Ethan was left alone in a house that suddenly became alien to him. He understood that further communication with Lindsay was inevitable. They were facing an unpleasant process of sorting things out, perhaps even a divorce. But now he wanted only one thing: silence and loneliness. 3 days passed, filled with dull pain and endless silence for Ethan. He didn't officially take a vacation, but he didn't go to work either. He called a colleague, said that serious personal circumstances had arisen, and asked for a couple of days off at his own expense. Colleagues, not knowing the details, wished him strength and expressed their readiness to help. He spent all these days in the house, sitting for a long time in the living room, looking at the wall or trying to watch TV, but turning it off after 5 minutes, unable to concentrate. "I hardly ate food, so I stuffed something into myself automatically." He slept poorly, nightmares about betrayal, and betrayal made him wake up in a cold sweat. On the fourth day, in the evening, the doorbell rang. Ethan felt his heart clench. He knew it might be Lindsay, but he couldn't hide all his life, so he went to the door and opened it. She stood in front of him. She had some papers in her hands, and her face expressed determination. "We need to talk," Lindsay said, not trying to smile. "I can't just give it all up." Ethan looked at her intently. "Didn't you quit? You have already made your choice." She lowered her eyes. "I know, but I have to understand if we can somehow." He interrupted her. "No, we can't. I made everything clear." He went out onto the porch, closing the door behind him so that she couldn't enter. "What kind of papers?" Lindsay sighed. This. This is what you need to sign if you want me to officially check out of this house. These are some bank documents for a mortgage. And one more thing." She tried to even out her voice. "Here is the petition for divorce if you decide to file one." Ethan looked at the papers with cold detachment. He knew that sooner or later it would come to this, but he did not expect that it would be so soon and that she, and not he, would take the first step. "Fine," he said dispassionately. "I'll take a look." She stood in front of him, nervously shifting from foot to foot. Her hair was tied into a severe bun, as if she had just left a business meeting. but there was pain and despair in the eyes. "Ethan," she said quietly, "I understand that I cannot ask you for forgiveness. I know I ruined our lives, but please, at least tell me what I can do to somehow fix this." He looked at her, and longing flashed in his gaze. "Nothing." She nodded as if she had expected such an answer. "I understand. Just know that I'm sorry. If I could turn back time, I wouldn't do it." He closed his eyes, trying to hold back the lump in his throat. Late. This ended their conversation. Lindsay was forced to turn around and walk to her car. Ethan looked after her, feeling that there was nothing left in his soul but emptiness. When the car drove away, he entered the house, sat on the sofa, and unfolded the papers. There were indeed legal documents related to mortgages, home ownership, and also sample divorce papers. He understood that he would have to formalize everything. Life demanded a logical end to what had once been their marriage. That night, he went to bed clutching the pen he used to sign papers. There was a draft divorce agreement on the nightstand. The decision was rooted in his torn soul, where there was no longer room for hope for a future together. And only in the morning, exhausted by insomnia, he finally fell asleep, realizing that the life he knew was over. In the days that followed, Ethan pulled himself together and decided to act so as not to wallow in suffering. He invited a realtor to discuss the possibility of selling the house. The pain from the memories was too strong, and he did not want to stay within the walls that had seen his happiest, and now the most bitter moments. In a conversation with the realtor, a young and energetic woman named Rachel, he tried to remain confident. "The house is in excellent condition," he said, showing her room by room. "I bought it with a mortgage, but I have a normal relationship with the bank. If there is a buyer, I can easily settle the formalities." Rachel carefully examined the rooms and made notes. "Understand. The area is good, the condition of the house is excellent. I think we will find buyers quickly, but I can ask why you decided to sell." Ethan froze for a moment. He didn't know what to answer. Finally, he reluctantly said, "Personal circumstances. I need to move." Rachel nodded without further question. Professionalism took precedence over curiosity. After she left, Ethan stood in the empty living room. He was overcome by a strange feeling of liberation. Selling the house meant a break with the past, which meant the opportunity to start anew, albeit without Lindsay. He knew that complex bureaucratic procedures, conversations with the bank, and paperwork awaited him. But this step seemed inevitable to him. He also signed divorce papers and filed them with the court, notifying Lindsay's lawyer. She, of course, tried to contact him, but he stubbornly refused to talk. They exchanged only official letters through lawyers. The marriage, which once seemed eternal, was approaching its end. Another evening, he received a call from Cody. "Hey, buddy, where have you gone? Melanie and I are worried." Ethan smiled quietly when he heard his friend's voice. "Hello, Cody. I'm still in this house, but I'm already planning to sell it." He filed for divorce. There was a pause at the other end. "Damn, bro. Well, I understand that this is probably the right decision. Listen, maybe you'll come to us. We're having dinner tonight. Melanie is making her signature cheese casserole." Ethan hesitated. He didn't want to show his pain, but he also knew that sitting alone in an empty house wasn't the best option. "Okay, I'll be there by 7. In the evening, he came to Cody. Melanie met him on the porch. "Hello, Ethan. I'm so glad to see you." She hugged him friendly, feeling that he was still depressed. Inside, there was already a smell of casserole and something sweet, apparently dessert. "Sit down, dinner is almost ready," she suggested. "If you want a drink, we have some good wine." However, Ethan was now wary of alcohol, remembering how he had recently nearly lost his head. "Yes, give me a glass of wine. I think it won't hurt." The three of them sat at the table and talked about different things. About Cody's work, about their small business, about their favorite TV shows. Melanie tried to make the atmosphere light, and Ethan was grateful for that. Although he felt empty inside, he was glad that he had real friends nearby. As dinner was ending, Cody asked, "So what next, Ethan? What are your plans?" Ethan pushed his plate aside and looked at them. For now, I want to wait until the house sells. I'll take a small apartment in downtown Nashville, and I'll probably immerse myself in work for a long time so as not to think about the past. Melanie smiled a little sadly. Understand. But still, don't forget about relaxation and hobbies. You love playing the guitar, why not get back to it? Ethan shrugged his shoulders skeptically. Somehow it all seems pointless now. Cody stood up from the table and patted his friend on the shoulder. Wait, don't get depressed. You have so many talents. And life does not end at this moment, remember this. Ethan nodded, knowing that they were right, but not yet feeling the inner drive. After dinner, they watched part of some new comedy show, and then Ethan, thanking for the warm welcome, left. That night he tossed and turned again for a long time, thinking about what Cody had said. Perhaps, indeed, he still has a long road ahead of him, and he cannot give up on everything. But for now, every day felt like a battle with myself. A few days after he finally got out to visit Cody, Ethan went to the nearest supermarket. He needed to buy groceries. He decided to stop eating sandwiches and instant noodles. While he was putting vegetables and some semi-finished products into the cart, work was on his mind. Soon he would have to return and finish the bridge project. The bosses gave him a short break, but not forever. He was replaying in his head how he would sit down to work on the drawings when he suddenly felt a strange heaviness in his gaze. Looking forward, he saw that in the same department, between the shelves with bread and pastries, standing the same man whom he had hoped for the first and last time he saw in his bedroom with Lindsay, Ryan. Time seemed to slow down. Ryan was in casual clothes, dark jeans, a t-shirt, and a light jacket over it. His eyes widened when he saw Ethan. He froze in place, pressing the handle of the cart so that his knuckles turned white. Anger instantly flared up. Standing in front of him was the man who had destroyed his marriage. Ryan was the first to speak hoarse and excited. "Ethan, I need to talk to you." Ethan was ready to turn the cart around and leave, but a strange feeling held him back, as if he wanted to hear what the man had to say. "I'm listening," he answered coldly, looking Ryan straight in the eyes. Ryan swallowed slightly, clearly nervous. I wanted to apologize. I know it won't change anything, but I'm really sorry it happened this way. Lindsay never said you had any problems. He hesitated, searching for words. I'm not making excuses, I know it's vile. But believe me, we didn't want to cause you such pain. At the sound of Lindsay's name, Ethan's insides clenched with rage. We didn't mean to cause pain, he thought bitterly. What were you waiting for then? He looked at Ryan and saw that he really looked confused and depressed. You knew she was married, Ethan squeezed out through his teeth and still continued. Ryan looked down. I knew. I'm a fool. There was a moment when I could have stopped, but I didn't, and I'm very, very sorry. Ethan felt adrenaline rush through his head. He could almost hear the blood pounding in his ears. With one quick movement, he could hit Ryan, release all his pent-up anger. But what will this change? Is that all you wanted to say? He asked with icy calm. Yes, Ryan clenched his teeth, looking at him pleadingly. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I just wanted you to know that I'm truly sorry. Ethan looked at the man silently. Memories flashed through his head of how he saw them together in his bedroom, how something broke inside him. But now he felt tired. It's as if he doesn't even want revenge anymore. It's clear, Ethan said quietly. Did you get what you wanted? Are you with her now? Ryan's face showed confusion. I don't know. We stopped communicating. Everything is too confusing. Ethan smiled wryly. So it wasn't worth it, right? Ryan couldn't find an answer. He just repeated again. I'm sorry. Ethan turned and walked away, pushing the cart in front of him. The bread he was going to take remained lying on the shelf. His heart ached, but he did not want to continue this conversation. He did not respond to Ryan with his fists, perhaps because he understood. The one who is truly to blame is, first of all, Lindsay, and nothing can be fixed. Ethan, wait, came from behind, but he didn't stop. He went to the cash registers, paid for his purchases, and almost ran out of the store. Getting into the car, he closed his eyes, trying to calm the trembling in his hands. In this involuntary encounter, he received a little more pain than he could bear. And yet, when I left the parking lot, I felt a strange sense of relief, as if I had come face to face with my worst nightmare and survived. But he spent the evening in heavy thought, wondering if his love for Lindsay was really so weak that she allowed herself to have a relationship with someone else. Or, on the contrary, did she simply have a need that he could not fill? Questions to which he is unlikely to find an answer. Soon the first potential buyers appeared. Ethan had to open doors for strangers, show them what their future bedroom and bathroom looked like. With each new demonstration, when strangers walked around the rooms asking questions about wiring, pipes, and the condition of the roof, he felt himself moving even further away from this place. Sometimes he went out into the yard while the realtor was conducting an inspection. There, in the backyard, she and Lindsay once had a barbecue, invited friends, and laughed. Even earlier, he dreamed that one day their children would run around here. Now all plans are a thing of the past. A few weeks later, Rachel told him that there was a good offer. A married couple from another state was looking for a new home in a quiet area. They offered a price that covered the mortgage and left a small profit. Ethan didn't care if he still had a plus. The main thing was to leave here without debt. After a short thought, he agreed. Having completed all the paperwork, they set a transfer date. Ethan realized that he had literally a few weeks to finally move out. He gave away some things to friends. Some of the furniture went to Cody. Melanie took some for her projects. He decided to load the remaining items into a truck and transport them to a warehouse until he found a new place to live. When the day came to transfer the house, he signed the documents in the presence of the realtor and the new owners. It was strange to see how enthusiastically they praised the space, discussed where they would put a crib and set up an office. He understood that for them, this was the beginning of a new life, but for him, it was the end of a whole chapter. Coming out onto the porch, Ethan took a last look at the house. A white facade, neat windows, a clean fence. The same one they laughed about painting while discussing the color. Lindsay wanted bright green, but they ended up going with light gray. "Goodbye," he said quietly, as if addressing himself. Rachel, standing next to him, caught a note of sadness in his voice. "If anything happens, call me. I will help you find a new apartment in the city." Ethan thanked her for her work and went to the car. When he got behind the wheel, a feeling of liberation mixed with bitterness washed over him. He sold the house where his family dreams once began, but without this step, he would not have been able to move forward. Taking another painful step towards a new life, Ethan decided to return to what he knew how to do best: work. During the paperwork for the sale of the house, he was on vacation and time off, but now he felt that he had to return to reality. On Monday morning, he arrived at the Miller construction office at 8 o'clock sharp. After passing through the turnstile, he greeted Mary at the reception. She gave him a kind smile. "Oh, Ethan, you've been gone for a long time. We were already worried." "It's okay, Mary. Just personal matters. But now I'm back." Entering his department, he discovered that his desk was littered with various documents, reports, drawings, letters from contractors. In addition, there was a bag of coffee on the table, unexpected, but pleasant. He recognized the gesture. Marcus had apparently left him a latte, knowing that Ethan loved good coffee. Marcus soon looked in and, smiling, extended his hand for a firm handshake. "Well, fighter, are you ready for battle?" "Ready," Ethan answered, taking the coffee. "Thanks for the reinforcement." "No problem. How are you in general? Have you come to your senses?" Ethan thought for a moment about how to respond. "Do I need to go into detail?" He just said briefly, "I'm gradually getting my life back together." Marcus realized that there was no point in asking too much and got down to business. "Great. Here is the bridge project. We have already reached the final stage of approvals with the authorities. It is necessary to cross out some components and parts to ensure compliance with the new safety requirements. Then we had a proposal for a new contract, but we will discuss this later." For the next week, Ethan threw himself into his work. He looked through the drawings, looked for errors, clarified estimates, and called contractors. Sometimes he stayed late, feeling that the more physically and mentally tired he became, the less energy he had left for soul-searching and bitter thoughts about Lindsay. Colleagues noticed that he became more silent and focused, but they respected his personal space. And Marcus, feeling that it was better not to push his friend, gently supported him in his work processes. Listen, let me take over the calculations of the arched beams, and you will take care of the working diagrams of the spans, okay? Okay, thanks for backing me up. Sometimes Ethan wondered if he was hiding too much from problems at work, but deep down he understood. Now he really needs to run away from his own pain, otherwise it will be sucked into the quagmire. In the evenings, when he returned to his small rented apartment in downtown Nashville, the one that Rachel had helped him find, he felt something like a brief surge of pride. I'm not broken. I'm moving forward. And even though there were still many unhealed wounds ahead, immersion in professional duties restored his zest for life, albeit timid. The word divorce sounded in his head like a bolt from the blue, but it was a logical continuation of what was happening. After Ethan decided to break off relations with Lindsay, she herself offered to formalize all the legal nuances. Both understood that it would not be possible to return to their old life. With the help of lawyers, they drew up documents and distributed the property, although ownership of the house had ceased to be relevant because the house was sold, and they divided the remaining amount based on the agreement. Lindsay didn't insist on alimony or any payments beyond what they had accumulated together, and Ethan appreciated this. Apparently, she admitted her guilt and did not want to complicate the process. One weekday, they both found themselves in the local court office, where the final divorce hearing was taking place. They entered separately. Lindsay came with her lawyer, and Ethan with his. When the judge called them in, Ethan saw Lindsay for the first time in weeks. She looked pale, averting her eyes when he accidentally met her gaze. The meeting itself passed quickly. The parties agreed with each other. There were no property disputes. The judge asked a couple of formal questions. Do you confirm that you want to dissolve the marriage? Are there any attempts at reconciliation? Both shook their heads. After signing the papers, they were given a divorce decree. Ethan looked at this sheet and felt a strange duality. On the one hand, pain and regret about the lost time, and on the other, relief that everything was finally formalized. When all the formalities were completed, the lawyers left. Lindsay stayed with Ethan in the hallway, briefly looking into his eyes. I wanted to say, she began, I sincerely hope you find your happiness. He tried to answer, although his voice sounded flat, almost mechanical. Thank you, and all the best to you. She nodded, and tears came to her eyes. But Ethan couldn't let himself drown in her tears. He turned around and walked away. The faster he leaves, the less painful this scene will be. Going outside, he breathed in the fresh air. The feeling of freedom was mixed with bitterness. So this is how a 5-year marriage ends, he thought. And yet he understood that it was inevitable. Without this step, he would not be able to move on. The phone rang. Cody. Well, is it all over? The friend asked, barely hearing Ethan's voice. Yes, we are officially divorced. I understand that this is difficult. Listen, how are you? Maybe we can have a beer in the evening. Ethan looked at his watch. It was about noon. Yes, why not? I'll come see you after work. After disconnecting the call, he took another look at the courthouse. It was as if something new was stirring inside him, as if the old stage was over, and an empty road opened up ahead that he had to go through. Yes, the pain would remain for a long time, but now he knew that no one was keeping him within the old walls. A few days after the official divorce, Ethan realized that he needed to finally put an end to the story with Lindsay. He remembered the wedding rings that were still in the small box. Previously, he could not bring himself to do anything with this symbol of their love. But now I felt that the time had come. One evening, when the sunset painted the sky crimson orange, Ethan put on a shirt, jeans, and got into the car. I drove through downtown to the Cumberland River, which crossed Nashville and was the heart of many local landscapes. He parked near a small embankment where tourists rarely walked. Dusk was already deepening, and there were few passers-by. Ethan got out and slowly walked to the very shore. The water carried its waves majestically and indifferently. He took out a wedding ring from his pocket, the same one that he once wore with pride, believing in eternal love. He clenched it in his fist, bringing it to his lips, not knowing whether he was saying goodbye to this symbol or thanking it for the lesson. A strange feeling reigned in my soul, melancholy intertwined with freedom. A quiet wind rustled in his hair, and lights flickered in the distance. Ethan closed his eyes and whispered, "Goodbye." With these words, he unclenched his fingers, and the ring fell into the water. Glimmering slightly in the last rays of sunset, it disappeared into the depths. Immediately a pain entered his chest, as if he had let go of a part of himself, but at the same time he felt relief. He stood for a long time, looking at the diverging circles on the surface of the river. Then, having calmed down a little, he turned around and walked back to the car. And although he did not know what his future would be, he clearly felt he had put an end to the past, and now he had to live on with this experience, with these scars, but also with new hope. After difficult months of divorce and selling his house, Ethan moved into a small apartment in downtown Nashville. The place was not the most luxurious, but cozy, a one-room space with a studio kitchen and a small balcony overlooking a narrow street. There were no memories of Lindsay, no old family photographs or familiar objects. Every corner said, "Start again." In the first days, he walked confusedly through empty rooms where he brought only a few boxes, dishes, clothes, a couple of books, a computer, and a few other small things. There were almost no fittings, just a sofa and a folding table, which he bought at a furniture store on sale. However, Ethan did not feel unhappy. Rather, he felt like a traveler in a new city, just waiting for him to open the map and go in search of adventure. To fill the emptiness in the apartment and in the soul, he decided to restore order and add comfort. I bought a green rug for the living room, several pillows with original designs, and a table lamp that provides soft light in the evenings. Gradually, the space began to fill with life. Every morning he got up early, did exercises or a light jog through the streets. Perhaps it was an echo of his past runs, but now he liked that the city life was in full swing around him. Someone was running to work, espresso machines were noisy in coffee shops, music was heard everywhere, sounding from establishments. This buzz of the big city helped him not to feel so lonely. "I'm starting a new chapter," he once said to himself in front of the mirror. "We need to get the most out of it." Work continued to occupy a significant portion of his time. He remained an engineer at Miller Construction, and after the completion of the bridge project, he was asked to design a new civil building. Although the lesson was not so large-scale, it was interesting. An office complex with modern architecture, where many creative engineering solutions were to be found. And in the evenings, when everything calmed down, he sometimes felt melancholy. But now it didn't seem bottomless. He was already able to get back on his feet, and although the wounds from the betrayal had not completely healed, he realized that he was able to enjoy the little things: delicious coffee, the smile of a passerby, pleasant music. One of these evenings, Ethan opened his laptop and suddenly thought, "I once played the guitar and composed songs." He flipped through old files on his computer and with a sad smile discovered the texts he wrote in college. Why not go back to music, he thought, and he was surprised how this idea caused a slight excitement in him. Thus began his new start without loud promises and plans, but with quiet confidence that life goes on and there will still be a place for joy in it. The new apartment gave Ethan not only a feeling of freedom, but also a new environment. There were a variety of people living on the same floor: a young student couple, an older man who always seemed unhappy with the noise, and a girl named Abby, a 28-year-old artist with an apartment directly across the street. The first time they collided literally head-on was a couple of weeks after Ethan's arrival. It was early morning, and he was returning from a run, all sweaty. The elevator door opened, and Abby walked out without noticing him. They almost collided. "Oh, sorry," she exclaimed, dropping the folder from her hands. Several drawings fell out. "It's okay, it's my fault," Ethan answered, quickly bending down to help collect the fallen sheets. The drawings had abstract bright lines, shapes, spots of colors that formed something mesmerizing. He managed to capture some impressive color combinations. "Very beautiful work," he said, returning the sheets of paper to her. "Thank you," Abby replied, shyly straightening her short blonde hair. "I'm here getting ready for the exhibition, so I'm carrying everything back and forth." They exchanged short smiles. Ethan noted to himself that she had friendly blue eyes, the look of which seemed open and warm. Abby pushed the folder to her chest. "You are probably my new neighbor. I saw you move recently." "Yes, I'm Ethan. I used to live in another area, but now I'm settling in here." "Great, my name is Abby." "Well, welcome, neighbors," she said, still smiling. "Just knock if you need something sugar or salt. I always have it." They laughed, wished each other a good day, and went to their apartments. Ethan slammed the door and, kicking off his sneakers, caught himself thinking that, for the first time since the divorce, he felt a pleasant spark when talking with a girl. He immediately interrupted himself. "No, I'm not ready for a new relationship, and perhaps none at all, and she just seems friendly." However, the thought of Abby remained somewhere in the back of his mind, like a new ray of light in his troubled life. A couple of days later, they ran into each other again in the laundry room that the residents of the house shared on the first floor. Ethan was loading the washing machine when Abby showed up with a basket of laundry, wearing striped pajamas. Seeing him, she waved animatedly. "Hello, Ethan." Also decided to do the laundry early in the morning. "Yes, so as not to jostle in the evening when there are a lot of people here," he joked. "How are you getting ready for the exhibition?" Abby placed the basket on a nearby table. "Oh, everything is moving forward. All that remains is to finish a couple of canvases and find normal frames. I'm getting ready for next week, which will be a small exhibition of local artists." "Great. It must be exciting." "Yes, yes. I always get nervous when I show my work to the public," she admitted, shrugging her shoulders. "But art is my language, my emotions. We must share." Ethan understood her feeling. When he played the guitar for friends, he also experienced a special thrill because he showed his inner world. They exchanged a few more phrases about what the weather was like, how long Abby had been living in this house. It turns out it was already a year, and that Ethan was still looking at new routes for jogging in the area. He noted that it was easy to talk to her. There was no tension or awkwardness. That same evening, when he returned from work, there was a small note on his doormat. "If you're going for an evening run, stop by. I can keep you company. Abby." Ethan smiled as he looked at the piece of paper. Maybe this is a sign that it's time to get out of the zone of his grief and at least make friends with the people who appear in his life. One evening, when Ethan was returning to his apartment, he saw a poster on the elevator door. "Open mic night at Bones Bar every Friday." Bones Bar was a 10-minute walk from his home and was known for allowing music, poetry, and stand-up comedy enthusiasts to perform in front of an audience. Seeing the poster, Ethan felt a slight pang of nostalgia. He used to often go to such evenings with student friends, and sometimes he performed himself, playing the guitar. Entering his apartment, he sat for a long time and thought whether to watch an old film or start reading. But his gaze automatically moved to the dusty case in which his guitar lay. He hadn't touched the instrument since all the turmoil surrounding Lindsay's betrayal began. "Maybe stop hiding," he muttered. He took off the case and took out the guitar. Rosewood fingerboard, long familiar tuners, everything was in place. He took a pick, ran it along the strings, and adjusted the tuning. The instrument responded with a slightly dull sound. It was necessary to stretch the strings and play out. Sitting on a stool, Ethan began to search. Fingers remembered movements, excerpts from old melodies popped up in my head. Gradually, the music filled the small living room with soft chords, and suddenly he realized playing had always been for him not just a hobby, but a way to express himself. He felt again that spark that made his heart beat a little faster. "Yes, I miss you," he said to himself, finishing the composition that he once composed in college. This melody was dedicated to future hopes and the city in which he studied. He didn't know then that he would end up in Nashville, that he would marry Lindsay, and that it would all collapse. The next day, after work, he picked up his guitar again and played some of his favorite classic rock ballads. Feelings that seemed frozen in him over the past months began to come to life. Instead of anger and sadness, a feeling of creative uplift appeared. When Friday came, Ethan made up his mind. He got ready, put on jeans and a simple black t-shirt, took his guitar in its case, and went to the Bones Bar. He wasn't sure if he would be able to perform, but decided to just see what kind of people came to the open mic night first. Inside the bar, there was a casual atmosphere. A wooden counter, several tables, a stage with a microphone and speakers. Some guy with an acoustic guitar was already performing, singing a quiet song about a broken heart. Ethan sat down at a table against the wall, ordered a non-alcoholic beer, and listened. After about 40 minutes, the presenter announced, "And now, if anyone else wants to speak, you are welcome." Ethan felt his insides freeze with excitement. "Am I definitely going to perform here like the good old days?" he thought. But something stirred in him, memories of what it was like to stand on stage and see people listening to your music. He stood up, approached the leader, and said quietly, "I'd like to try it." "Great, buddy. What is your name?" "Ethan." Let's greet Ethan with applause. The presenter announced into the microphone, and a friendly clap was heard in the hall. Walking onto the stage, Ethan sat on a high chair, adjusted the microphone, and checked the sound of the guitar. His heart was pounding and his throat was dry, but he gathered his courage and began to play a familiar tune, the same one with which he had once begun his performances in college. And suddenly the anxiety subsided. The fingers remembered the right chords, the voice found the right notes. He sang about how important it is to find your way, even when it seems that all the doors are slammed shut. When the song ended, there was a brief silence in the bar, and then applause was heard. Ethan, excited and a little dazed, smiled at the audience. "Thank you." He played another song, more rhythmic, and received an approving response. Stepping off the stage, Ethan felt euphoria and freedom that he had not felt in a long time. People sitting at neighboring tables nodded to him with smiles. Someone showed a thumbs up. They said, "Cool." For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was alive. Sitting at the bar with an empty glass and a guitar in its case, he suddenly noticed a familiar profile in the crowd. It was Abby. She stood near the counter and looked straight at him, smiling widely. When Ethan caught her eye, she walked over. "I didn't expect to see you here," she exclaimed. "Have you performed?" "I heard the last chords." "Wonderful." Ethan was confused. "Thank you, I just decided to try it." "Very cool. I come here often. I love the atmosphere of creativity. I even sometimes draw in the corner when musicians perform." They exchanged thoughts about music and how great it was to hear people share their art. When the bar began to close, they left together and walked to their house because they lived next door. The coolness of the night was refreshing. Abby took her bag, carefully pressed it to her side, as if it contained valuable drawings, and said, "You know, I think we're all looking for ways to heal. I through paintings, you through music." "Maybe so," Ethan agreed. "My life has turned into chaos lately, but music helps me not to go crazy." "I'm glad that you have such a way out," Abby said softly, stopping at the entrance. They stood under a lantern that illuminated their faces with a soft golden light. Ethan felt that this girl's presence was somehow quietly warming. However, he made no move. He still had too many wounds inside him. "Thank you for coming after the performance," he said. "It was nice to see a familiar face." "You're always welcome, neighbor," she answered with a smile. "If you perform again, let me know. I'll come cheer for you." They wished each other good night and went to their apartments. Ethan lay down in bed, feeling that something in his life was beginning to change for the better, although he was in no hurry to draw conclusions. But he knew one thing for sure. Music had returned to his life, and with it, a glimmer of hope for inner healing. In the following weeks, Ethan and Abby often crossed paths in the hallways of the house or met by chance in a nearby cafe. Sometimes they agreed to go for a run together. Although Abby was not a professional runner, she loved outdoor sports. One day she suggested, "Ethan, Let's do a morning run along the Cumberland waterfront. It's so beautiful there at dawn, and I've never run there. Great idea. Tomorrow at 6? At 6? She snorted. Okay, I'll just agree for your sake. The next day, they met at the entrance. The sun had just appeared. The streets were almost empty. The path to the embankment took about 15 minutes. While jogging, they talked about music and paintings. Ethan felt that it was easy for him to talk about creativity with Abby. She understood the subtleties of the inner world when a person expresses himself through art. Inspiration is an insidious thing, Abby said, moving around after the race to cool down. Sometimes it comes at 3 in the morning, and I grab my brushes and start painting. And sometimes, silence. I have a similar thing with music, Ethan admitted. Sometimes I pick up a guitar and the notes flow out on their own. And sometimes I look at the strings and realize that I don't feel anything. You still need to look for the moment and try. Otherwise, you can wait until inspiration leaves forever, she smiled. So, joking and chatting, they ran to a small cafe, where they drank a glass of freshly squeezed juice. Abby laughed as she recounted the time she panicked and smeared paint on a canvas before handing in a project, and Ethan laughed back as he recalled his own absurd experiences in engineering. Gradually, their communication grew into something more than just, hello, bye, neighbor. They became friends, or so Ethan perceived it. He noticed that Abby was attractive, talented, and had a special spark about her. But every time the desire to get closer to her rose within him, he remembered the acute pain of Lindsay's betrayal. This wound has not yet healed enough for him to let new feelings into his heart. Abby was sensitive. She saw that Ethan was trying to revive after a difficult story, but did not force events. Sometimes, when they sat on a park bench, she would look at him thoughtfully, as if she wanted to ask about his past, but when she met his gaze, she would switch to another topic. Maybe we can go to my exhibition on Saturday, Abby suggested one day, sipping coffee. There will be a small presentation, some light drinks, and refreshments. I'll show you my new works. Of course, with pleasure. I'd be glad to see what else you come up with on your canvases. And so their friendship began. No hint of romance, at least not an overt one. Both seemed to enjoy communication in which they could talk about their hobbies and joys without touching on painful topics. Saturday arrived the day of Abby's exhibition. Ethan dressed for the occasion a little more neatly than usual, dark trousers, a light shirt. The exhibition took place in a small art space near their home. Several local artists, designers, and art lovers came. Soft jazz was playing, and the light smell of wine and snacks wafted through the room. Ethan walked past Abby's paintings, reading the titles Crossing Roads, A Midnight Dream, Reflections. The canvases had expressive strokes and bright contrasts. He really felt the energy living in these works. He also realized that every picture contains emotions. There was sadness, hope, and strength. When it was all over and the visitors began to leave, Ethan approached Abby. Well done. I liked it. You are very talented. Thank you for coming, she answered, apparently tired, but happy. I love it when people I know see what I do. It gives meaning to the work. They exchanged smiles, and Ethan felt a warm wave of sympathy for her. After that, he went home, leaving her time to sort out the paintings and rest. It was already evening when he heard a dull knock on the door. He shuddered in surprise. There was no one in the corridor, but he noticed that there was an envelope in the mailbox. When he picked it up, he saw familiar handwriting Lindsay's. The address was indicated as his new place of residence. Where did she find out? Probably through a lawyer, he thought. His heart sank, but he still opened the envelope. Inside is a sheet of paper covered with words of repentance and memories. Lindsay wrote that she regretted everything she had done, that she had lost the person she loved most, that Ryan was just an illusion, and that her real relationship was with Ethan. She asked for forgiveness and hoped that at least someday they could talk. Why did you decide that I want to read this? Ethan whispered, feeling a surge of bitterness. He finished reading the letter. I'm not asking for everything back. I know it's too late. But at least forgive me someday, and if you can, don't hold a grudge against me for the rest of your life. Ethan felt the old wounds begin to bleed, but now he knew that there was no turning back. He clutched the letter in his hands. For a second, it seemed like I needed to answer, tell her everything, but then I realized, no, he won't do that. He went to the window, opened the shutter, and let the cool evening air touch his face, and he put the letter back in the envelope and threw it into the bottom drawer of the desk. The next month passed in a bustle of work. Ethan was closely involved in the design of a new office complex, met with customers, and discussed details with architects. He fell in love with the process itself, the opportunity to create something new and modern by solving technical problems. His concentration and effort were not in vain. The bosses noticed that Ethan, after all his personal troubles, had not only returned, but was also working with renewed energy. One day, he was called into the office of the general director. Ethan walked in, a little nervous, not knowing what to expect. The project manager, the boss, and a couple of other executives from the board of directors were already sitting inside. There was a tense business atmosphere in the office air. "Come on in, Ethan, sit down," said the boss. "We were talking about your work on a new project. I must say, you are doing an outstanding job." Ethan felt a pleasant excitement. "Thank you, I'm trying." "Your efforts are appreciated," the boss smiled. "We have decided to appoint you as project manager for this office complex. Of course, there will be support from Marcus and other colleagues, but from today you are in charge." Ethan was a little confused. The project manager is not only an honor, but also responsibility. Budget, deadlines, team coordination, work with a client. Nevertheless, a feeling of pride began to envelop him from within. He looked at the meeting of his superiors. "Thank you for your trust. I will do everything not to let you down." Upon returning to his department, Ethan felt a surge of strength and joy. Marcus shook his hand. "Well, congratulations, boss," he joked. "I knew that you would make an excellent manager as soon as we started designing the bridge together." "Yes, I didn't expect it myself." Ethan patted his friend on the shoulder. "But now we will steer everything together." This news brought Ethan joy that he had not felt for a long time. What happened reminded him that life goes on, and in it there is a place not only for pain, but also for success and growth. He called Cody in the evening. "Looks like I've been promoted. Project manager, can you imagine?" "Damn, this is super news. It should be noted," Cody exclaimed. "I know a great place that serves great craft beer. We'll definitely go, but a little later. It's too busy right now." After finishing the call, Ethan glanced at his phone, where there was another unread message from Lindsay. She was probably trying to see or hear him again. But he ignored it, focusing on the joyful events of the day. Life had finally smiled on him, and he wasn't going to miss this chance for normalcy. In the evenings, when the pressure of work subsided a little, Ethan thought about how he wanted to spend time outside the city, in nature. He began to remember how long ago he dreamed of walking part of the Appalachian Trail, one of the most famous hiking routes in the United States, starting in the southeast and stretching across many states. And suddenly he realized that now he had no special obligations other than work, and he could carve out a couple of weeks of vacation when the project entered a calmer phase. "Why not?" he said to himself one evening, browsing online resources about trekking. "This can be a symbolic reset moment to finally leave everything behind." Ethan began to slowly prepare. He bought a tourist backpack, checked his old boots. It turned out they should have been replaced, studied the routes, read reviews of experienced travelers. Soon he began telling his friends about his plans. "I want to walk a short section of the Appalachian Trail, maybe about 100 miles. 100 miles? Cody exclaimed. "Are you sure you are ready for such loads? I run in the morning, and my physical fitness is normal. Anyway, it's not a race. I go for fun and reflection." Melanie asked curiously, "Aren't you afraid to spend the night alone in a tent?" "There are a few, but that's what makes it interesting. In addition, the trail is full of tourists. Some will get in your way." Abby, hearing about his plan, lit up. "Wow, this is cool. I've always wanted to try long hiking. Maybe next time I'll keep you company." "I will be glad," he answered with a smile. But now I need to go alone, it seems. She nodded understandingly. Sometimes you need such solitude to sort yourself out. Indeed, Ethan felt that this hike was more than just an opportunity to test his endurance. He wanted to be alone with nature and his thoughts, walking kilometers day after day in order to leave old grievances and the burden of the past behind him. He soon chose approximate dates, May next year, when the weather would be comfortable. All that was left was to wait until the end of key stages at work and take a vacation. The understanding that this adventure awaited him gave him strength in his daily routine. From time to time, he imagined how he would stand on the mountainside, looking at the endless expanses, feeling freedom not only physically, but also internal. The long-awaited day of vacation has arrived. On the eve of departure, Ethan spent the evening packing a backpack, a change of clothes, a sleeping bag, a light tent, and the necessary supply of provisions. Excitement was mixed with joy. For the first time in a long time, he felt that he was doing something solely for himself, for the sake of his growth and peace of mind. Before leaving, he stopped by Cody and Melanie's to say goodbye for 2 weeks. "If I don't come back, you know where to look for me," he said jokingly. "You'll be back," Cody winked. "New projects are waiting for you, and most importantly, we are waiting. Don't forget to send us a couple of photos," Melanie added. "I believe in you." On the way back to the house, he met Abby, who came out of the elevator, holding a small package in her hands. "This is for you," she said, holding out the package. "A small drawing of the mountains so that you remember why you are going there." He unfolded the package. There was a watercolor landscape with mountains, fog, and the rising sun. Amazing work, especially in mini format. Fine lines, soft color transitions. His heart sank with warm feelings. "Thank you, Abby. This is a very valuable gift. I'll take it with me as a talisman." She blushed a little. "I wanted to capture how I see it. I hope your mountains turn out to be even more beautiful." They hugged goodbye, and Ethan felt tenderness for this girl who had become close to him in a short time. But now he had a goal to go on his little journey. The next morning, he got into the car and drove to the starting point, where he intended to leave the car and walk along the Appalachian Trail with a backpack on his shoulders. As he began the climb up the first hill, feeling the gravel crunch under his boots and the fresh air filling his lungs, his heart pounded with anticipation. Days passed, he walked along the path, met the same nature lovers, sometimes shared a fire and dinner with someone, and sometimes spent the night alone, listening to the rustle of the wind and the sounds of the night forest. In the silence of the mountains, the depth of his own feelings was revealed to him. The pain of betrayal, the bitterness of a failed marriage, the fear of a new relationship. But with every kilometer passed, he felt that the burden on his soul was becoming lighter. On the 7th day of the journey, he climbed one of the mountain ridges, from where a majestic view opened up of sprawling forests stretching to the horizon. The sun was setting, filling everything around with golden colors. Ethan stopped, took off his backpack, threw his head back, looking at this magnificence. "I don't know what lies ahead, but I'm ready to find out," he said out loud, as if challenging both himself and the world. The wind blew through the grass, as if in response. This moment became a symbolic starting point for Ethan. He was completely letting go of his past, ceasing to be a person who was overtaken by betrayal. Now he wanted to move forward with new aspirations, new people, and new feelings. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.